Hello and welcome to this revision video for the GCSE Poetry Anthology. Before I start on today's poem, let's just take a look at this amazing black and white photograph taken of this homeless person. I love the contrast here between the black and the white, the bright lights of the street or the bright textures of the street, which really do pose a great dynamic with the darkness of the trousers and the shadows on his jacket there. As we look at that picture then, we may qualify that as being art, quite a special photograph, quite well taken, with a great pose. Are we though forgetting, however, that this is a real man? This is a man lying on a street. This is a man with a background. This is a man who's clearly uncomfortable lying on that street with his head pushed up against a wall. We assume that he's sleeping, but it could of course be that he's actually died. That then serves as an interesting introduction to the poem Decomposition by Zulfakar Ghose, today's poem from the GCSE Anthology. As normal, we're going to look at AO1, AO2, and lastly AO3. The three learning objectives then when studying GCSE poetry. Now the poem itself is set in the slums of Mumbai. You can see lots of pictures there of those slums and the kind of people who live there. Each of those people is like to be starving. Each of those people lives life at the roughest end of society. Each of those is struggling every day for their own existence. Zulfakar Ghose was born in India and witnessed firsthand the vast divide between the rich and the poor cities like Bombay, now Mumbai. The poem captures the harsh reality of poverty, especially in urban India, where beggars dying in the street were and still are a tragically common sight. The poem exposes the indifference a society can show towards the suffering of the most vulnerable. As both a poet and someone familiar with photography, Ghose explores how art can sometimes romanticize or sanitize real suffering. The poem mirrors Ghose's broader literary themes of self-awareness, identity, and moral conflict. The speaker's shift in tone from distant observer to someone filled with discomfort reflects the poet's moral reckoning with how suffering is viewed and represented. Let's find out a little bit more then about the place this poem is set. There we have it then, some facts about the Diwali slums. Without further ado, let's now focus our attention on the poem itself. Decomposition. I have a picture I took in Bombay of a beggar asleep on a pavement, grey-haired, wearing shorts and a dirty shirt, his shadow thrown aside like a blanket. His arms and legs could be cracks in the stone, roots for ants' journeys, the fly's descendants. Brainwashed by the sun into exhaustion, he lies veined in stone, a fossil man. Behind him there's a crowd passing bemused by a pavement trickster, and quite indifferent to this very common sight of an old man asleep on the pavement. I thought it then a good composition, and glibly called it The Man on the Street. Remarkable how typical it was of India that a man in the street lived there. His head in the posture of one weeping into pillow chides me how presumption at attempting to compose art of his hunger and solitude. Let's dig a little deeper then into the life of a photographer and why he might choose a homeless man as his subject.
My name is Steve McKenzie, and I've worked downtown for 15 years. I've passed homeless people countless times and never really engaged them. I mean, I would occasionally give them, $1 or smile at them, kind of treated them like, a lamppost or just something that you'd see on the street. One day I was walking to work, and I had passed this guy numerous times. I probably passed him for 10 years. And then one day I walked past, and I saw on the light pole there was a sign that said, "Rest in peace, Raymond." And for the first time, I thought, my gosh, I lost a friend. And I'd never met the guy, never engaged with him, but it really felt like I'd lost a friend. That was the point where I thought, you know what, how's it going, man? I'm going to start engaging homeless people on the street. Good to see you, man, because their lives matter, they're important. I'm Steve, by the way. I want to do more than just walk by them or give them a buck. I want to engage them and find out what their lives are like and who they are. You mind if I take your picture? I've taken about 150 pictures of homeless folks. Myron, I want to build bridges and not walls. Everyone's unique. I know where I met them. Carl, people on the street are no different than people in big white houses. These people aren't faceless. They're not nameless. Terry, we all want the same thing, to be loved, accepted, and respected. They need to be remembered. Their lives matter.
I went from literally overnight having a 3-bedroom townhouse by a normal family and just overnight, and I lost everything.
It's fascinating to think that all these people have lives, will have lives, and did have lives before they ended up on the street. Now let's take a closer look at the poem into the start, middle, end, and some language and structural choices each part uses. The title, Decomposition, suggests a decomposing body of the beggar, but also the deconstruction of the carefully composed photo that's been described. The enjambment mimics the ongoing relentless nature of poverty. There is no full stop, no clear end to the suffering. It also creates a dreamlike or hallucinatory quality, though the beggar is melting into the environment. It begins with the personal pronoun, I have a picture, placing the speaker directly into the narrative. The movement from the observer, I took in Bombay, to microscopic focus on the man, roots for ants' journeys, shifts attention, pulling the reader in close and forcing them to confront the details often ignored. There is a deceptively simple image here, conveying abandonment. Shadows are intangible, and using one for warmth is tragically futile. This suggests that even his comfort is illusionary, the powerful metaphor for neglect and social failure. He is literally disappearing into the pavement, emphasizing urban decay and the way humans are absorbed and erased by the city. It challenges the reader to question whether they would even notice him, has he become part of the background. The man is reduced to a surface, a means for other life forms to traverse. Conveys extreme vulnerability. He cannot stop the insects, just as he cannot change his circumstances. Flies and ants often symbolise decay and neglect, forcing the poem's title and theme. Let's now move to the middle of the poem. The lack of punctuation at line endings reflects a stream of consciousness style, suggesting the speaker's thoughts are unfolding in real time. It also conveys emotional continuity. There's no clean break between each stanza, just as there's no easy separation between the image, the onlookers, and the speaker's own guilt. Veined in stone suggests the man has merged with the pavement, reinforcing his invisibility and permanence as a feature of urban decay. Veined evokes natural imagery, rock and minerals, and human veins, blurring the line between living man and geological remnant. The lively presence of pavement trickster contrasts starkly with the motionless figure of the beggar. The crowd is passingly bemused, and their interest is shallow, fleeting. The word passingly suggests they move on quickly, both physically and emotionally. Very common sight is particularly damning. It suggests the normalization of poverty to a point where it's invisible or unremarkable. This line directly critiques social desensitization. The shock of human suffering has been dulled by its frequency. Good composition reduces the human subject to photographic aesthetic, exposing the ethical tension between art and empathy. The word composition distances the speaker from reality in the scene, focusing instead of visual balance or framing, a shallow response to deep suffering. Ending the stanza on the speaker's self-critique allows the entire stanza to function as a re-evaluation of the speaker's initial detachment. This reversal of tone, from casual observer to critical reflector, is structurally important. It forces the reader to reconsider all that's come before through the new lens of guilt and discomfort. And now the end of the poem. The tone here is remorseful and contemplative, a stark contrast to the earlier glib tone, glibly calling it man on the street. This shift reinforces the poem's self-critical structure, where the speaker revises his earlier perspective in the final stanza. Similarly, like metaphor, the image of the beggar with his head bent down likened to one weeping on a pillow. This introduces a powerful sense of emotional and physical vulnerability, tone and sorrow and intimacy. This comparison evokes the image of someone in private grief, as though the beggar is suffering in silence and deserves not pity, but dignity. The man's posture imagined as reprimanding or chiding the speaker. This indicates the speaker's internal guilt and self-reproach. The word now suggests a change in the speaker's awareness. He didn't feel this guilt at the moment of taking the photo, but in hindsight. The nouns hunger and solitude are raw and powerful. They represent not just physical deprivation, but emotional and existential isolation. These lines serve as the poem's emotional and moral climax. Structurally, the poem begins with detachment, moving through social commentary, and ends in decay. This shift in external observation to internal reckoning is essential to the poem's narrative arc. Ending with self-criticism forces the reader to question the ethics of art and voyeurism, not just in the poem, but in life. Now let's summarise the poem then into its three key features. Who is the poem about? The poem Decomposition is about a dead beggar lying on the streets of Bombay, whose body the speaker initially photographs. This ultimately focuses on the speaker's realism of his own detachment, highlighting how art can fail to fully capture the pain and humanity of those who suffer. What is the poem about? The poem Decomposition explores the contrast between the artistic representation of the dead beggar and the harsh reality of his suffering. This highlights the speaker's guilt and failure of art to truly capture human pain and poverty. Why was it written? The poem Decomposition was written to highlight the dehumanizing effects of poverty and to question how suffering is often reduced to artistic or aesthetic value. Zulfakar Ghose wrote it as a unique critique of how people, including artists, become emotionally detached from real human tragedy. Now we're going to look at three key quotes and what to say about each one. There's key quote number 1. Key quote number 2. And key quote number 3. Now we're going to move on to the essay writing section of this video, how to form the thought or the essay based on the notes you've just made. As you know, we need to comment on language, meaning, and context. Today we're going to focus on how to write about the last line of the poem. You're going to see a grade 9 answer, as well as the more basic higher grade pass of a grade 5. Here is the grade 9 response. In comparison, here is the grade 5. You can clearly see there's a lot more depth in the grade 9 answer, the language is much stronger, and there is clear, developed analysis as the reader explores the text, looks for those hidden meanings, looks at why the poet deliberately chose these particular words for this particular meaning. You can see it deliberately comments on tone as well as language choices, mentioning technical devices such as juxtaposition as well as the word phrase. We also, in the last sentence, get a sense of what we're supposed to learn by reading these lines. In comparison, there is still analysis in the grade 5, but you can see it's much less developed. There's not really any exploration going on there. It's simply what individual parts of the poem mean, but there is enough to get the grade 5. Thank you very much then for listening to this video around the poem Decomposition by Zulfakar Ghose. See you in the next one.